how do you run non-standard projects and make them work? One of the biggest problems is getting non-standard projects off the ground, especially if you're a CEO, founder, corporate executive, sponsor, or a rogue small business trying to get things moving, trying to get vision moving and trying to get new ideas off the ground. I have three areas that are really important to get a project finished. So the start, the middle, and then the actual execution. And so let's focus on solution planning. When we have a vision or some problem that needs to get solved, and you are thinking, okay, well, I'm going to start a project. A lot of people do is they go from planning. They're like, okay, what's the problem? Well, the problem is this. They don't think about it very much. They end up jumping right to project execution. And they don't put enough thought into these two. Now, there are two real situations when we're talking about projects. There are non-standard projects and there are standard projects. And so a standard project is, there's a subject matter expert, and that person knows how to run that project. They've been in the industry and it's not a mystery. It's just like, let's get in there and get it done. There aren't many unknowns. And if there are unknowns, this guy already knows what they are. No big deal. It's been done before. No need to reinvent the wheel. We're just transplanting a best practice from somewhere else to here. Where this falls short, though, is when you have non-standard projects. And those are usually like a startup, you have a super exciting startup that has a cool idea. And then, or you have, and so it's never been done before. So they have to string things together. They have to be able to see the big picture. They need to see a system and say, oh, wouldn't this be cool? Now, and then there's also something as simple as a local business. Like maybe it's a plumber, right? And the plumber is like, sorry, plumbers, I really only know, plunger. But we could do a wrench, probably like one of those big wrenches. Anyway, like a pipe wrench. All right, enough of that. All right, so plumber. So you're a plumber and there's a new way to do something, a whole new process for doing something. Maybe HVAC is a little better because there's always innovation with HVAC. There's a new way to do something, but it hasn't made its way into the local market. Furthermore, you can't just plug it in here. You have to adapt it. It has to be rolled out. You have to think about the people locally. Maybe you want to do a little bit of a research and find out, do the local people even think this is a problem? I mean, obviously HVAC is going to be a lot different between Alaska and Phoenix, Arizona. So there are always going to be differences. And the bigger the differences, the more you need a little bit of this thinking, right? It becomes a non-standard project. You're starting a company and the local community has never had that company locally before. So there are all kinds of things that qualify as a non-standard project. But a lot of times the problem is an undeveloped or underdeveloped idea. What that means is it's either vague, something they won't tell you or can't clarify. It's something they can't clarify or just can't get an answer to. Like, we need to wait for more info. We're not sure yet, and you end up waiting for things. And you don't really want to kick things off, project management secret, right? You don't want to kick something off until you're ready to get into it. You may do a pre-kickoff to figure things out ahead of time so that you can kick off. And that's totally doable, especially with non-standard projects. There are vague answers that slow you down. You don't want vagueness. The problem isn't that this person, the founder or whatever, doesn't have specificity. The problem is that they won't let you figure it out. So now I am very fond of figuring out projects. I love it. I love turning their problem, their solution into solid timelines. But if it's vague, then it's going to be really hard for me. And they won't let me attack that vagueness and turn it into real terms, either because through coyness, they don't want to, I don't know why they don't want to say. Maybe they're just that kind of person where they don't like to take a stand. Maybe they are hiding invisible political or personal issues and they won't tell you what they are. And you can't see them as the project integrator. I guess it's fair too that I would say, this is really a partnership. And I have that down here somewhere. Yeah, visionary and integrator. I mean, it's really this partnership. And it's unfair to talk about this without really talking about these two roles. So the founder, the visionary, can be somewhat vague, but if I am like, hey, we need to answer this question, then she needs to be willing to work with me to answer it. Can't be hiding political or personal issues. Then the other thing too is they're not ready and they just don't want to admit it. Sometimes this happens like right away. My first conversation with them and they're like, oh, you mean that's what's included? You mean that's what's required? I'm like, yeah. We do need to think about the budget. And they're like, yeah, well, I'm not ready right now because the budget's too high. And I'm fine with that. I want to hear the truth, but I also need to hear the truth, right? I don't mind if we talk about it. Most integrators like me are not going to be mad that you realize there's a problem. You realize you have to push it back, and that's fine. I see it as part of my job. It's to help you see when something's not worth doing right now or whether it is worth pursuing. Okay, so that's the first one, vague. But what about unrealistic? They unrealistic expectations. So when they won't let you, again, when they won't let you sort it out and organize the project at a high level to see if it's even feasible, then you can't, if it's too unrealistic, they're not going to want to talk about feasibility questions. Now, if it's unrealistic, that's fine. Unrealistic isn't the problem. It's the inability to admit that it's not feasible right now. And so maybe this and this are kind of similar. And then there's just plain dishonest. Like they have no real plan to execute. I've been at startups that are this way, where they get in front of people, do a big presentation, and they say all these cool things at like this big, tech conference, and everything's, it's all these ideas, we're going to change the world, right? But then ultimately they don't have the ability to do it. And they don't even care about finding out. And I've worked in places where they had people who could figure it out, but they didn't have the vision or willingness to make it touch ground. They don't like integrators. And the reason for that is that the integrator is like, okay, but I want to do it and know how to do it. Therefore, you have to share the problem and the reason. And so I can understand the why, so I can turn it into an actual project for you and get it done. These things are only a problem if you can't get clear responses in the situation, can't get clarity from the visionary, or the visionary just doesn't want to talk about it. So how do you go through the process of handing this off so that the visionary and the integrator are playing from the same sheet of music? In other words, the visionary's vision is expressed well, and the integrator has captured that properly and can turn it into action. Well, the first thing you want to do is identify and define the need and why it matters. Typically, think of a project management iron triangle. You have quality, budget, and the timeline. What we're going to do first, though, especially with projects like this, is we're not going to try to think of everything at one time. Because again, these are non-standard projects. They defy our ability to just make them simple and on the back of a napkin, at least not the whole thing at once. So the first thing we're going to do is define the need and why it matters. What is the problem we're solving? Why it matters? That's the first thing. Problem. The second thing is the solution. Well, here's the order at which we're going to attack this. The solution and why it will work. And so the solution, we want high-level deliverables. We don't want to know everything we're going to have to create. This is not the time for that. Once we talk about those, we're coordinating that with a timeline. And usually you talk about these things at the same time because your brain can handle those. First, deliverables and when we're going to need them. Or you might even start with timeline. Like, when are they due? Either way, you're doing high-level deliverables and timeline. Once you get those simplified, you can move down to the budget, because then you're going to be like, all right, cool. Let's talk about how much it's going to cost. Now that you've defined this, you understand that. Now you're bringing this to bear. Budget puts pressure usually on deliverables and timeline. And so you're going to have to say like, all right, well, if the timeline is immovable, then we're going to have to change the deliverables a little bit because the budget has to be a little bit lower. It challenges you. And frankly, this is a fun challenge for me. Is trying to figure out how to get deliverables at the same level that's needed so that it will fulfill the need, but then done in that budget. Any good project manager knows you need margin. If the budget's like, I need 20,000 to do this, and they're like, well, you get 10,000. You still need 20% margin to make sure there are always going to be things that aren't expected. And so make sure you get that in there. Then you incubate. So this is what we're doing here, classic creative process. It's the same thing. When I was a copywriter and writing ads, I would get an assignment and immediately try to write the ads. I would do that evening. The next morning, I would come in, look at the copy again, and it would seem clear to me that I had way too much. I needed to remove stuff. And then, they say write hot and edit cold. As soon as I saw the problem, I wrote, and then I edited. This is a bigger thing than just writing a radio ad or something like that. We have non-standard projects. So you're going to have to go through this many times potentially. I kind of jumped over a step, didn't I? So let's go identify and define, solve, create the solution, the deliverables, timeline, budget, and then sleep on it. Go through the next day and say, okay, let me just create this again on paper and say, what are the main things I need to do from memory? Don't look at your project again yet. Create it from memory. Once you create it from memory, you may decide, and then you look at your high-level deliverables you had before, and then you realize, I didn't even need these. and it reduces it down a little bit. The funny thing is the incubation, usually when people talk about the creative process, they're like, work on the problem, and then you let your subconscious mind work on the problem. And that's not what happens. What happens is in the incubation step, your subconscious mind does not work on the problem. Your subconscious mind literally forgets the details that aren't core to the problem. And some people are better at this. I actually think that I would forget things overnight and come in the next day as a tabula rasa, just completely fresh. And it allowed me to do this really well. My cycle was really fast because of that. Now, there are problems with forgetting everything overnight, but one of the benefits is that you refresh faster. That's a little tidbit in case you're like me. Forgetting the details tends to simplify things. Now you're able to simplify and then repeat the process by making sure you understand the definition, reviewing high-level deliverables, and usually each step, you're actually going lower and lower. Each time you repeat, you're getting more detail and building things out more. And then you can incubate. And as you go, you'll find you need this a little less. And you probably reach a point of diminishing returns on this process. But the first couple of times, do this at least twice. Define the problem, define the solution, incubate, and then repeat. And do that at least 2 times in most projects. And you're going to find that you get simplicity faster. And that when you go to attack problems and create solutions, especially for non-standard problems, you're going to have a lot more clarity at the beginning, which affects everything downstream. It affects the quality, high-level deliverables, your timelines, and your budget. Because you're thinking of things ahead of time, you're getting the important things crystallized and absolutely clear. And now you're able to move on to project planning. You already saw that you're already sort of doing that, high-level deliverables, but then the integrator can work toward project planning. And I don't know why my thing's not working here. And then project execution is a whole different thing. It's a whole different skill set, slightly different skill set. But the whole point is the big areas in non-standard projects, solution planning, project planning, and then project execution. And then the creative process works really well by defining the problem really well. And then following this process for creating the high-level tasks and incubating the project at a high level so that it's ready to move to project planning.